Welcome back to another installment in our quest to build the world's most powerful Power Mac G4. In the previous two episodes, we installed a custom-built dual 2 GHz G4 processor card, we hacked up a formerly PC graphics card to work in the Mac, and we more than doubled its gaming performance. We even got over 100 FPS in Minecraft, which runs notoriously poorly on PowerPC Macs. So today, let's take this 2002 powerhouse even further and give it real deal SATA to run our SSD by using this PCI SATA controller card, which has been flashed for Mac and should work in both OS X and OS IX. But unlike the previous upgrades that we've done, I'm actually a little doubtful that this is going to make any noticeable difference compared to just running the SSD on the IDE bus using a cheap IDE to SATA adapter, which is what we've been doing. Stick around as we try to eke out gains right up against this machine's limitations, and we'll find out together if SATA over PCI is worth the hassle. So stay tuned. And if you enjoy seeing beautiful but obsolete machines upgraded beyond all that is reasonable, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. I have some really cool builds in the pipeline that are definitely worth sticking around for. So you might not consider a hard drive controller card to be a particularly interesting upgrade, but PCI SATA controller cards are especially fascinating to me. There is no more dramatic of a bridge between old and new than a card like this, because it allows you to run modern SATA drives, the same ones you can buy brand new today, natively in absolutely ancient systems, as long as they take PCI cards. In fact, the first PCI Power Mac came out way back in 1995, so theoretically, you could have native SATA capability running modern SSDs in Macs that came out when System 7.5 was the hot new OS and NCSA Mosaic was still a reasonable choice of web browser. But there are some caveats. Most importantly, the speed of SATA is measured in gigabits per second, with throughput ranging from 150 megabytes at the low end to 600 megabytes with SATA 3. Your real-world performance, though, is limited by the PCI bus, and 32-bit PCI, which is what this card is, and the only thing that most Power Macs support, has a maximum of just 133 megabytes, if we're lucky. Now, there is 64-bit PCI, which our Power Mac MDD actually supports, but precious few Mac-compatible SATA controller cards actually support this, because the Power Mac that replaced the MDD, the G5, natively supported SATA. I'm trying to get my hands on a Sonnet Tempo PCIX SATA controller card, but they're super hard to find. The only one currently on eBay is going for about £150 from the UK. So if you want to see how to flash one of these cards to work on Mac, I'll link below to a video from Hrutkay Mods where he does exactly that. The short of it though is you need to find a card that has the SIL 3112 chip from Silicon Image. That's the only chip that will work with the hacked ROM, and you have to have a PCI DOS PC handy to run the flashing script. The resulting flashed card, though, should work in both macOS 9 and OS X, and you can actually still find them for sale pre-flashed on eBay, which is actually what I've bought here, mainly because I'm curious to see if it's actually what's advertised. Though I do have my weird DOS PC standing by in case we need to reflash it. Now the card itself is nothing special, this is just an unbranded generic PCI card which has the correct chip. It's the Silicon Image chipset that's important, although the mini CD-ROM labeled Extending Future is a pretty hilarious bonus. And you know, this is actually a very nice PCB on this card as well, which kind of reminds me of the quality you can get from the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay has long been a staple of the retro computing community and PCB prototyping in general due to their great pricing and turnaround as fast as 24 hours. And if you have huge fumbling Hulk hands like me, not well suited to the rigors of precision soldering, they're now offering an assembly service promotion for only $30 for 1 to 20 pieces. So if you have any PCB needs, I hope you'll give PCBWay.com a try. Okay, so I've really talked a lot about how cool I think PCI SATA controller card upgrades are in old Macs, but if you remember back to the beginning of the video, I said I was doubtful if this upgrade would have any meaningful impact on the performance of this PowerMac G4 MDD. So let's take a look at something that's on the motherboard, which is going to make a big difference here. You see, on the MDD, there's actually 3 different IDE connectors. This one here is ATA 66, which is where the hard drive was originally. This here is ATA 33, which is intended for the CD-ROM drives. It's the slowest one of the bunch. But around the corner here, behind the heatsink, that's actually ATA 100, which is just about as fast as possible. And actually, I think it's going to be just about as fast as the PCI bus's optimistic 133 megabyte bandwidth. So my guess here is that we won't actually see much of a speed bump in disk speeds at all from the SATA controller card versus connecting the SSD to the ATA 100 motherboard connector here, which is what we currently have. And worse, using the SATA controller card for the boot drive will likely make startup time significantly slower. Instead of just booting off of the IDE that the system already knows about, each time it's going to have to find the PCI card, initialize it, find the drive attached to it, and then boot from it. And I think a slower startup time paired with negligible drive performance increases just won't be worth it. The system will, on the whole, just feel slower. So let's take some drive benchmarks on IDE, and then we'll install the card, see if it actually works, and then see if the benchmarks show any improvement. Oh, and while we're in here, I'm a little concerned that our fancy new graphics card is overheating because I've had a couple freezes that seem to be graphics card related. And the custom ROM that we flashed on here has the temperature sensor disabled because otherwise it interferes with macOS 10 Leopard. So what I want to do is try to install this kind of goofy expansion card slot fan thing and see if this helps keep the graphics card cool. Alright, well, it's a little bit of a mess of cables in there, but let's see if this is extremely loud. Okay, I'm just going to power it on like this and see if these fans work and what they sound like. Yeah, they're actually kind of noisy. I don't know if I'm going to keep these things. Okay, so I've changed these fans to run on the 7 volt setting, the blue nub right here. And when I had it set to 12 volts, which is going to make these run as fast as possible, I think that took too much power away from this connector going into the graphics card because it actually gave me some corrupt graphics on startup and froze. But even at 7 volts, it's still a little bit loud. Okay, so I actually decided to open up the airflow inside the case a little bit more. In addition to repositioning these 2 fans here to actually point towards the graphics card, I took a bunch of stuff out of the case that we're not going to be using. I took out this 3D printed bracket because why not just mount the SSD directly to the back of the case? And also, since we're not using the slower ATA 66 for the hard drives, I just took that bracket out because the system fan here draws air through these grates here. So why not give it a wide open space? And I also took out the other IDE cable for the same reason. So now we have a completely open void in there to pull air through. And I'm even thinking of mounting a fan actually to the grate here. I think I could just screw it in through the grate holes here and get really great airflow through here, although I'd have to take the front off of the case to do so, and that would be annoying. But anyway, let's close this up, make sure it's stable, and then take our hard drive benchmarks. Okay, so I tested this out last night for about an hour and a half on a Brankus Creations live stream on YouTube, and it was rock solid, letting me watch the stream and chat, and no freezing, no crashing, and the fan noise was perfectly acceptable, especially compared to what a stock MDD sounds like. So let's test the drive speed with Xbench. And what's interesting is the Xbench baseline results here are for a G5 dual Power Mac 7,3, so similar to Steve's machine from Mac 84 that we kind of went up against before. But let's test this machine and we'll see how it compares to the baseline G5 here. So I'll just close out everything to make sure we have a clean slate. All right, so we'll just run all the tests, which include the disk test, and let's go. Okay, so I ran the test 3 times and got 3 different scores, but all of them were above 80%. And this score, the fastest, we got 98.61%, the speed of the baseline machine, which is the Power Mac 7,3 G5, which is 100. So according to this, we are basically as fast with our G4 as a Power Mac G5 7,3 running at 2 gigahertz. So that's a pretty impressive score. But of course, this benchmark assumes that the G5 is running with a spinning hard disk, so we obviously got way better scores there. So these are the scores we're going to try to improve even further with our PCI SATA card. So I've saved these benchmark results. Let's give this machine some real deal SATA. Okay, so what I think would be neat is to actually use this guy here. And what this is, it's a quick release SATA drive enclosure that can be mounted on a PCI bracket here. And that way we don't have to stretch a cable all the way across the case to reach the drive. And also, I want to use this machine for experimentation. I want to try Linux on here and all kinds of stuff. So having easy access to just pop the hard drive out the back of the machine using the cool quick release is going to make that a lot easier. So even if the SATA isn't better, I think I'm still going to leave this installed and we'll just use the IDE adapter on the back of it. But I'm hoping SATA really does make a difference using PCI instead of ATA 100. So we'll put our enclosure right here and our SATA controller card right here. And then all we have to do is run the SATA cable from the enclosure to the back of the card, and we'll use port number 1. And then we can grab SATA power from our power supply here, which doesn't quite make it over. All right, well, for testing purposes, we'll just be careful and close the case and plug it in at the same time. And here's our hard drive. And now all we have to do is pop this quick release and plug the drive in. How cool is that? Okay, so I've carefully closed this thing back up, and we'll just have to make sure we remember that we did that so we don't go throwing this door open and then ripping the SATA cable out of that adapter. But let's turn this thing on and see if it recognizes the hard drive. And it does not. Alright, starting up and holding Option. Okay, it does not see the drive at all, so let's take that quick release adapter out of the equation and try again. Okay, I've got the drive connected directly to the PCI SATA card and power is connected, so let's see if this boots. It does not see the drive. Alright, so I've tried this card in every PCI slot in the MDD and none of them worked, so guess what time it is? Yep. That's right, it is Weird DOS Desktop time. Okay, I've got the card installed in the Weird DOS Desktop. Let's power it on and see if it works. Okay, that's a good sign. They popped up with the card. So the card works. Maybe they just forgot to flash it. Okay, so we're in FreeDOS, and I have the flashing software on here called updflash.exe, and our firmware.bin is what goes onto the card. So this should just be a case of doing updflash firmware.bin. And controller type 2 for 3112. Found the card. All right, apparently it was successful. BIOS is loaded, so let's toss this card back into the MDD and hopefully it works now. All right, I've got the boot drive reconnected to the newly flashed SATA card. Let's boot this up. Okay, so a little bit of a different error now. I think it found the OS 9 partition, but doesn't want to boot from it. Okay, so now it does see both the Classic and the Leopard partition. It didn't want to boot into Classic, so let's try booting into Leopard. And that's certainly a good sign. All right, so we are booted into Leopard off of the SATA card. That is awesome. Well, it's sort of awesome. It's actually also extremely disappointing because the card itself is a cheap, no-name, generic card that just happens to have that SIL 3112 chip on it. If you buy the card itself, not flashed for Mac, it's only like less than $20 on eBay. But I bought this one flashed for Mac, and they charged $50 for it. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I did that so you don't have to. Because obviously they didn't flash it right, so hopefully I can get my money back for it. But now that we have flashed it and gotten it to boot into Leopard at least, we can run those benchmarks and see if the speed gain for a SATA card on PCI is worth it. Especially over this, again, very fast IDE ATA 100. Let's run Xbench again. Okay, so the results are in, and we scored 95.54, so that's actually about the same as we scored before. We actually scored 98, but that number can vary by a couple points each run, so honestly, not that much of an improvement in the score. But let's check specifically what's up with the SSD speeds. So there's definitely some improvement, but honestly, not that much, and that's what I was expecting. So, for example, our random access speeds have much more significant gains than our sequential speeds, which I believe is to be expected. In fact, some of our sequential seems to have gone down, but definitely our random speeds have increased, but really only a couple percent. So our first score, 46.13 megabytes per second, improvement over 43.55 megabytes per second. Not that much of a gain. We have 102.84 megabytes per second, a pretty nice gain over 84.97. The third score here, 18.54, 18.11, and then our fourth score, 92.2, a decent improvement over 77.65. Okay, so I ran the benchmarks a few more times, and I got pretty much the same result each time. And while these definitely weren't the results I was hoping for, again, they were kind of the results that I was expecting. This SATA PCI card just does not make that much of a difference, especially on this MDD with the already really fast ATA 100 IDE. And worse, this card came without the right flash on it. So in reality, I just got a super cheap $17 PCI SATA controller card, and I paid like $50 for it, and that is extremely annoying. And while it does work with the flash from the excellent Mac Rumors forum thread on it, which I'll link below, and also Mod's video on it, which does an excellent job showing how that flash works. We did lose, apparently, macOS 9 compatibility. It will not boot into macOS 9.2. In addition, it does take longer for the machine to boot up, so overall, this is a much worse experience with this PCI SATA card installed. Now, I will contact the seller of the card to see if they can send me the correct BIOS for me to flash for macOS 9 compatibility, or if they'll send me a new card if they have a slightly different card that works better under macOS 9. And if they do, I'll definitely update you, and I might use that in a different build because, again, this IDE is already almost as fast as PCI SATA can be. But if I use that card on a much older machine, like say a beige machine with PCI, then the SATA card will make a much bigger difference over super slow ATA 33. But hopefully I saved you $50 if you were looking at buying one of these cards yourself on eBay. Just buy that inexpensive $17 version, which will be shipped from the US, at least from what I saw, and it only takes 2 seconds to flash it, and once you flash it, it does work. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more mirror drive door shenanigans like this, of which there will be more, please subscribe down below, and thank you very much for watching. And a special thanks to Tom, Stig124, Justin, Greg from Mods, and Chris, who are my highest tiered patrons, and all of my Patreon supporters for helping to make these shenanigans possible.